So good afternoon, and thank you so much for the opportunity to speak today to the Mark Conference. What a privilege it is to share this stage with five amazing personalities. I am really honored. But I did notice right away that I'm old enough to be Brad, Alyssa, Jennifer, Marty, and Wesley's father or even grandfather. But that's okay. Well, I'm telling people that don't know much about the conference, hey, the conference is named after me. So with that in mind, let's talk a little bit about your experience at a land-grant public university and the tools that this public land-grant university is giving you to make your mark. So for me, in 1973, my mom dropped me off at Rutgers, and I'm still waiting for her to come back. Overall, it's been a pretty good run, as our introduction said, 48 years, 4 degrees, 3 jobs, and 1 wife, thousands of incredible students, and thousands of wonderful friends and colleagues. I consider myself to be one of the luckiest people around. Like many of you, I'm a first gen at college, of course, quite a few years before you, but still a first gen college attendee. I grew up on a farm in Burlington County, New Jersey, was very fortunate to get a scholarship to attend Rutgers, and I stayed, and I stayed, and I'm still here. So I want to talk to you about my journey, and much more importantly, I want to talk to you about your journey and how you can use your time at Rutgers, this university, this public university, this land-grant university, to make your mark on society and to make the world a better place. And I'm really sincere about this. You're attending a land-grant university, and some of you know what that means, and some of you don't. You see the stationery, you see the signage around campus, and what does that mean? It actually has a great history. It's got a part of it, the history is a little dark, and we'll touch on that as well. But in general, the concept is a good one. It's the brainchild actually of Congressman Justin Morrill, who was from Vermont, and President Abraham Lincoln. And there have been, as you know, in our history, many standout presidents, but on almost everybody's list, Lincoln makes the top 3. He was faced with extraordinary challenges. He was tasked with healing a greatly divided nation. The country was positioned to reunite itself after the Civil War, a war that was one of the most extraordinary in our history. Do you know that there was about 620,000 troops that died as a result of this war? That was greater than any other American conflict combined. It is extraordinary. And so Lincoln was really tasked with a big job to try to bring this all back together. And one of the things that he realized is to make it all work, you needed to provide people with an education. Prior to that, education was really available only to the elite. It followed the European model. Here in the United States, even the predecessor to Rutgers, Queens College, which we'll talk about in a couple of minutes, was really set up to educate the elite and educate clergy for America's churches. So Morrill and Lincoln had this idea. Actually, Justin Morrill had the idea way before Lincoln was elected president, but he couldn't get much traction for it. So finally, when Lincoln needed some things to knit the country back together, he was able to use the land grant concept, and off we went. So a land grant is a very literal term. It means land was granted. To Rutgers, land was granted 210,000 acres in what we now know as Utah. And they sold that 210,000 acres and bought a 100-acre parcel that's over there along Route 1 on Route 1 and College Farm Road. It was called the Nielsen Farm. If you go to Nielsen Dining Hall over at Douglas, that's the same family. And the proceeds from that 210,000 acre sale allowed them to buy 100 acres here in New Brunswick. So you can see real estate was even expensive in New Jersey 150 plus years ago. And so that was the experimental farm that's part of this land grant system. So President Lincoln and Congressman Morrill made a mark. So let's get back to the Rutgers part of the equation. So Rutgers, remember, was a private institution. It was chartered in 1766, originally called Queens College, and is the 8th oldest college in the United States, the 2nd oldest in New Jersey. Princeton is quite a bit older than we are. And so it's one of the 9 original colonial colleges. And for the longest time, it was operated by the Dutch Reformed Church. Princeton, by the way, was started by the Presbyterians. So many of our important learning institutions here in New Jersey had a religious start. And so off we go to start Rutgers with a land grant twist. Rutgers was desperately trying to compete for the land grant status. They were competing against Princeton, and they were competing against the College of New Jersey, which many of you knew first as Trenton State. So when Rutgers was formed, Frelinghuysen and Hardenberg were the two religious leaders. Both of them were Dutch clergymen, and they had put this all together back in the 1700s. If you go to Kirkpatrick Chapel sometime and you sit there and stare at the walls, you will see both of them. As an aside, I've never noticed any of them smiling. The entire group of pictures there, everybody looks rather somber. Where did the word Queen's College come from? Well, Queen's College came from the fact that it was in honor of the last royal governor that we had in New Jersey, and that was William Franklin. And as an aside, he was the illegitimate son of the famous American patriot, Ben Franklin. So King George's queen consort was Queen Charlotte, and that's where the Queen's College part came from. And for many years, of course, you know, we had Rutgers Prep, which was the high school, as well as Queen's College, which was the forerunner to Rutgers. So here comes George Cook. George Cook was a rather remarkable person. He came to us from Rensselaer Polytech, and he was a professor of law and engineering and agriculture and chemistry. He was a true Renaissance man. And he became the first director of the New Jersey Agricultural Experiment Station. And that all took place back in 1864. Rutgers beat out Princeton. Rutgers beat out the College of New Jersey. And so Professor Cook was appointed a professor of chemistry. He was the state geologist, and he did amazing things. He started the New Jersey Geological Survey, which eventually became the U.S. Geological Survey. He started the New Brunswick Public Library. He was the vice president of the American Association for the Advancement of Science. He was a leader in what ultimately became the National Academy of Science. So George Cook was a rock star. He was someone who really brought Rutgers to great prominence. In fact, if you look at it historically, George Cook probably did more for Rutgers than any other faculty member. And so with all of this in mind, we started the land grant system. We became a really, truly public institution to reach out to every single person who wanted a public education here in New Jersey. And the other thing that he was a visionary, you know, we think so much of buy local, buy fresh, farm to table. George Cook wrote about that in the 1860s after he looked at the 1860 census and said, wow, New Jersey's sitting right in the middle between New York and Philadelphia. And if you look a little further between Boston and Washington, there's a place for us in New Jersey. George Cook made a mark. And so how do we apply that to ourselves? So we have this great history, which I think is an inspiration to us. I think we have George Cook as a role model. I've certainly looked at George Cook as a role model for me. So I came to Rutgers, and I'm all excited with my approach to a degree in agriculture. And I was a student, a graduate student, a faculty member, and a couple of times I've been an administrator as well. And I wanted to make a difference in a small way. I think what each of you need to do is kind of do a little reality check. Look in the mirror and say, what do I want to do? What do I like to do? What do I need to do as I go forward? And you have to realize three things. You have to realize that you really want to make a change. You have to be confident that you have something to offer. And I know each of you do. And you need to be humble. So off I went and found myself, after being trained first in agricultural science and later as a toxicologist, that I did have something to offer. But it came in a very circuitous route. I think the other thing you need to remember as you plan your life, as you plan your career, and I don't mean, you know, when you do your scheduled classes, someone at Rutgers says to graduate with this degree, you need these courses. I know that. I'm a faculty advisor, and, you know, we try to be flexible, but there are just certain things you have to do. What I'm saying is, when you step back and look at the big picture, let some of this go into auto mode. Let some of these things happen to you in a way that, you know, you may not have planned them, but they've turned up at your doorstep as an opportunity. And I'll give you a couple quick examples. So when I had my first administrative job at Rutgers, after I had spent some time teaching and being a faculty member, and I still teach a lot, and I'm still a faculty member, I worked for a really remarkable person, Dr. Bernard Goldstein. Dr. Goldstein is one of the world's leading experts in cancers that are associated with soft tissue, and as a result of things like benzene-induced leukemias. And Dr. Goldstein was always in demand. One week he was offered to go to give a big talk in Paris, and another in Warsaw. So he looked at me and he said, "Hey, I'm going to France. You're going to Poland." I'd never been to Poland, but I could give the talk. So I went. After I did that, I sort of got excited about the opportunity to start to do global health. I'd never traveled anywhere. I grew up on a farm in Burlington County. And I came back from Poland just excited about the opportunity to start to do what I do in other venues globally. Now, remember, this was like in the early 1990s. In 1989, Poland had changed from from a communist approach to a more democratic approach. Martial law had ended, so it was not the easiest place to travel in, and the people that like to watch everything you're doing were still very much active and watched everything you're doing. But it worked out really well, and it was a mistake. Well, it wasn't a mistake; it was an opportunity. Dr. Goldstein took the big talk. I took the little talk. It turned out to redirect my career. So I want you, when you see these chances to redirect your career, not to overlook them, but to embrace them. That turned out to give me opportunities to work in both Asia and Africa. A few years later, I was asked by a former classmate if I would be willing to go to Thailand and talk and teach a course on risk assessment, something that is part of my scholarship. And they had a program funded by the Asian Development Bank. This was this new graduate program. Again, it was kind of by default. A couple of weeks before the program had to have started, the Australian government had sort of a big disagreement with the university in Thailand. They had nobody to teach it. And so they said, "Hey, can you come teach this?" Part of me said, "Gee, I'm the second choice for this." But the other part of me said, "Why not? I've never been to Asia before." And off we went. This unique experience had translated into 21 consecutive years of teaching this risk assessment course. It has given me 21 years and 700 students, and I still taught the course this year, but of course I had to teach it virtually. So I guess in a way, I made a mark, actually 700 marks. From there, it gives you the opportunity to learn a little bit more. Once you start to do these things, you get credibility, and you can go ahead and apply for funding from the National Institutes of Health, the U.S. Agency for International Development, and take the platform that you've trained yourself in, whether you're an English major, a history major, a performance major, a pharmacologist, an agricultural scientist. You can take that and use that as a platform to go out and look for funding to do other things. I went ahead and started to take that information and really take the show on the road. As you see on the left, meeting with farmers who have GMO cotton and try to understand what some of their concerns are about using genetically modified organisms. And on the other side of the picture are my wonderful women farmers in Niger, a small country in West Africa, where we're going after some USAID funds. 80% of the agriculture in Niger is done by women. And so we're working with women farmers to give them some tools that they need, very appropriate, basic tools, and to empower them, to help them with microcredit to grow the food that they need. It doesn't have to be fancy. You don't have to know all the answers. All you have to do is have an open mind, an open heart, and a little imagination, and a lot of friends. And this will all work for you. The other thing that you need to do as you go out and try to learn this is to learn to listen, to learn to understand what other people's concerns are. Over on the left side, you see a wonderful group of ladies at a mosque in Indonesia, Banda Aceh. Banda Aceh is very remote, it's very rural, but it gave us an opportunity to work with a community to understand what their needs were. I went in with the idea that it's going to be my usual agricultural stuff and environmental stuff. No, these ladies were telling us that their biggest concerns were they were worried about the kids. They were worried about their teenagers at night and the trouble they could get into. So I had to sort of recalculate. But you have to stop and learn and listen. Or this wonderful group of people on the right in Myanmar, who are farmers who were trying to help them understand how to better protect themselves from pesticides. I wrote the curriculum, but we got one of the graduate students whose undergraduate classmate was a local movie star to go ahead and do the training. All those people didn't show up to see me, trust me. They showed up to see this local movie star, old ladies and little kids and everybody in between. But it all worked out okay. It made a difference. You take these experiences and then you share them with you guys. You share them with my wonderful Rutgers students. All of these opportunities have allowed me to teach summer service learning classes in Thailand. And you can see two of the wonderful 20 students that go every summer with me to Thailand to learn about the Thai healthcare system in rural communities. And it's just a wonderful opportunity to get out in the field and see what life is really like in a rural area, to see what people's true problems are, and to have a little fun too. Everybody likes to take selfies. I love to take selfies. My now 31-year-old makes fun of me. She says, it's so embarrassing, Pop, that you do this. But quite frankly, I'm old. I can be embarrassing and nobody cares. It's all right. And it's a great fun. I think you have a chance in 2021, once we get past the pandemic, to reconnect yourself, not just with your friends at Rutgers, not just with other people in the United States, but to really become a global citizen. For you to be successful as you go forward, to make your mark, you need to be a global citizen. And if I can, I'll help you get there. I also think that you need to look in the mirror sometimes and make some changes yourself. So I want to just tell you a very quick little example of where I realized I was way off base. So I've been teaching about health a very long time. As I mentioned, this is my 48th year at Rutgers. And I've always been kind of a big person. In fact, I've always been way overweight. The beautiful little lady that you see on the left side of the slide is 105. And she really is very petite. She was about 4'6". And this is in Banda. I'm not that tall, I'm about 5'10". She is in Banda Aceh. And so part of the project we had after the tsunami in Banda Aceh was to, have a little public ceremony. And I got to meet the oldest lady in the village. She's 105. And when I met her, she said in Bahasa, their local language, "Apakah gamu gemuk," which translated into something very funny for everybody but me, because I don't speak Bahasa. So finally I said to the translator I had, "Mohammed, what did she say?" "Nothing, Professor." I said, "Clearly she said something." And clearly everybody thought it was funny. She said, well, basically she said, "Wow, are you fat?" So I came home and said, "You can't believe what this little old lady said to me." And when you're 105, you got no filter. You don't have to have one. And my wife pointed out, yeah, well, the lady made a point. So I finally took myself seriously and I lost a whole person, as you see on the right. It's a good thing to do. So what's important? What's important is that take what you know, take what you like, take the passion that you have and translate it into your life's work. It may take you a while to get there. You may not be the first choice for people to go give a talk in Paris. You go to Poland. You may end up giving a 21-year run course in Thailand, knowing that someone from Australia was the first choice. But if you do it long enough, you get good at it, it's okay. And for me, it's even translated into a textbook on the topic, because I've been doing it so long, and an honorary degree from Chulalongkorn University. This is the Crown Princess of Thailand on the right. As it turns out, she and I are just a couple days apart in age, and the middle person is the Dean of the School of Public Health. I'm one of 3 Americans to have an honorary degree from this university. The other 2 were Bill Clinton and Lyndon Johnson. Not bad company, huh? So as we get to the end of this visit, because we're almost at the end, I want to emphasize to you how important it is to enjoy your time at Rutgers, to know that you're a public institution, to know that there's a sense of service, to know that your participation in something like a MARC conference is one of many opportunities to learn about the things that you can do, the challenges that you have. For me, as I am in the last decade of my time at Rutgers, I think that I have had the best job in the world. And my mark are some of the people you see in front of you. I don't take any credit for their success. These are all rock stars. These are all wonderful young women and men. Whether they're my global students, like the Filipino students I have up in the corner, as you see on the right, or my toxicology PhD students. I even have in the middle, in this picture, the Assistant Commissioner of Health, Lisa Starry. This is a good thing. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to the talk. Go out and make your mark. And just like the prophet Isaiah said, go out in joy and lead forth in peace. May the mountains and hills burst into song to greet you. Thanks.